Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Don't Risk It podcast presented by VFIS Risk Control and Education. This program focuses on the exposures our clients frequently encounter and discusses some potential solutions to help reduce these exposures. I'm your host, Chris Rodgers, and today we're discussing arson investigation in emergency services. Joining me on the program today is Bill Wiegman, and Bill is a fire chief for a local fire department in the state of Pennsylvania. Bill is joining the program to discuss arson investigation and how it can impact emergency services and their operations. Bill, I want to thank you for joining me today, and I really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to what you have to say. So let's get started with the conversation. Can you tell us about your background and what led you to arson investigation?
Sure. Before coming to VFIS, I was the fire chief, chief fire marshal, emergency management coordinator, and EMS coordinator for a municipality in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Part of my responsibility was fire investigations. My staff and I investigated several fires, not only in our own municipality, but in adjoining municipalities where we helped out with mutual aid. So for the past several years, I spent a good amount of my time going to school for fire investigation and then conducting fire investigations.
So arson is a broad topic. I'm sure you learned that in school. So is there a specific area that you're going to focus on today with our conversation?
Yes. Today we're going to talk about youth set fires and youthful fire prevention and intervention programming. Throughout my life, I have had a passion for the prevention intervention in youth set fires. In previous careers, I've worked with kids who have set fires. I've worked with adults who have set fires. I've worked with firefighters who set fires. So my experience over the last several years kind of has led me on a journey to become engaged with youthful fire prevention intervention, because statistically what we know is that we have a dramatic impact on recidivism with juveniles who are involved in fire play if they have the proper intervention programming.
So what has your experience been in working with youth that set fires?
My experience starts a long time ago when I was a young professional, and I worked with kids as a therapist with kids who set fires as a mental health clinician. And I think that the reason why I worked with those kids is because I was a mental health professional and I was a volunteer firefighter. And they were like, well, I guess you know something about this, so you can work with the kids who set the fires. And that kind of grew into being involved on the countywide task force advisory board and the statewide advisory board for youthful fire prevention and intervention. So not only was I a firefighter, then a fire chief and a fire investigator, but I also was a clinician that worked with kids who were involved in these types of incidents. So I can bring a different perspective than just the fire marshal. The fire marshal, he or she knows how to refer these kids to programming or maybe what to do to get help, but I bring a little bit different experience because I actually worked one-on-one with these kids or worked in group therapy settings with these kids and the adults as well. So my background's a little unique that before I was a career fire chief, I was a volunteer fire chief. And when I was a volunteer fire chief, I worked as a juvenile probation officer in the special offenders unit. So again, I was working with youths that set fires. So in the realm of youthful fire setting, I bring a different experience because I've worked on so many different levels with the kids that are involved.
So, from when your career started to where it is now, there's been a lot of change. One of them being social media influencers, and social media, has that had any type of impact on youth fire starters?
Yeah, I mean, we see we see all of the the TikTok challenges and the Instagram reels and kids wanting to parrot or mirror that behavior, and I'm sure that has led to some more incidents of youthful fire play. But when we look at it traditionally, we see a couple reasons why kids set fires, right? Number one, and probably most of the kids that we see are curious about fire, right? They want to know the power of fire. They want to control the fire. So, a lot of these kids set fires because they're curious about what fire can do. Then we look at the kids who set fires as a cry for help, right? They've experienced some sort of trauma. We see that fire is the way they communicate. And we see this a lot with female fire setters, where they're using fire as a way to communicate some form of experienced trauma. And then we see our kids who have mental health issues, and they're using fire to manifest their anger or their symptomology of their mental health condition. And then lastly, we see a lot of kids who are delinquent fire setters. They go out with their friends and they set fires, they cause trouble, or they're clowning around or goofing off. I think, in my experience, the kids that I worked with most closely are the kids who are curiosity-based or calling for help-based, right? When I was a probation officer, it definitely worked with the kids who were delinquent fire setters because they got in trouble and they were held accountable. But they were the kids who were teenagers, pre-teenagers. Our curiosity-based, our trauma kids, they were much younger. I remember working with kids 3, 4, 5 years old, some that set significant fires. Ones that set their parents' beds on fire when their parents were in the beds. Or I had most recently with our intervention team, we had a young girl who was split from her biological sister. And where she was staying, the parents, as a punishment, took all the toys out of her toy box. So the girl we were working with broke into the apartment, opened the toy box, saw that all the toys were gone, and then she set the apartment complex on fire. And she had to jump out of the second-story window because she trapped herself in the apartment. In the apartment, 6 units burned to the ground. So, in my experience, we've worked with kids all across the spectrum, from small curiosity-based fires to I actually worked with a juvenile who set a house on fire and somebody perished inside the house.
Wow, well, that's I have some experience. Not me, my brother. When he was I guess when he was about 10, he was playing with GI Joes, and he wanted to make it a little too realistic, and he set my grandfather's carport on fire. So that was my first introduction to a fire truck showing up and putting out the fire, and then obviously, I guess, my first introduction into a youth fire setter that I didn't know that would become what it became now.
Yeah, I would think that most of the time, it doesn't grow, it doesn't increase in severity and frequency, right? I think that most of the time, these kids out there light fires, whether they're curious or whatever, and they get held accountable, whether it's not by their parents or their grandparents or somebody says, you don't do that, you could burn the house down, right? But we know that the kids who like to light fires and enjoy fire play, if there is no intervention, whether it's education or therapy or a mixture of both, could continue to increase in their fire setting behavior. And what we know is as these kids increase in their fire setting behavior, most of the time, the frequency and the severity of the fires will increase. So we need an intervention program for our youth so that we can prevent these types of behaviors to continue to spiral out of control as they become adults. And we see there are some adolescent limited fire setting kids, right? They're just kids and that's what they do. But there's also some life course persistent fire setters, and they're the ones that are most dangerous, right? And we know that when we look at how fire setters start, we see that they start with kind of small vegetation fires, and then they grow to unoccupied vehicles, abandoned houses, and then all the way up to occupied buildings. So there is the need to address this behavior, and I think the National Fire Academy has the Juvenile Fire Setter Interventionist Specialist and Programmer certifications, and they're kind of the leader in the fire service with juvenile or youthful fire setter prevention and intervention, right? If you want to be a intervention specialist, or if you want to run a youthful fire prevention intervention program, they're that's the training you have to have, right? That's the benchmark training. I've been fortunate enough to be part of great countywide programmings, to start countywide programmings, to be on the Pennsylvania State Advisory Board and Steering Committee, because what we know is there are a lot of youth set fires. We know that a lot of them are underreported, right? And more importantly, we know statistically that if we take a kid who has been playing with fire and we put them in an intervention program that consists of education and some support system, such as mental health support, or really the holistic approach to human development, that we significantly, dramatically decrease recidivism rates or continued fire play with these kids. So really, the coolest thing is the holistic approach, right? And we see that really good fire intervention programs consist of fire professionals, juvenile probation professionals, children and youth professionals, mental health professionals that make up their multidisciplinary team that really can holistically impact the children and their family, right? And what we see successfully, like when we build our programs out, it's not a punishment program. It's an education program. If the juvenile is in trouble, then, that's for the courts to determine. And certainly the courts can refer the juvenile to a program. But the programs I've been involved with involve a mental health professional and a fire service professional going out to the home, meeting with the kid, meeting with the parents, asking, the right questions and making sure there's working smoke alarms in the home, making sure they have a fire escape plan, and then providing the educational piece. And really that team collaborative effort is really important, because a lot of these kids that we see might have some family issues going on, or might have some housing issues, or might not be able to get the medication they need. So if we come in with the team approach, that holistic approach, then we've seen better outcomes with kids.
Great answer. Back to my brother's story. My mom held him accountable.
Yeah,
and her intervention method was a belt. But this was the '80s, so it was a little different time.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of resources out there that cover this topic. What are some of the organizations that have taken the lead in prevention and intervention programs?
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, a lot of your major cities have fire prevention and intervention programming for youths. We see like Oregon is well known in the field. Pennsylvania was well known a decade ago and are coming back. Massachusetts. So there's states fire marshal offices that do a really good job, but there's also individual counties and cities that do a really good job. I think the best place to start is the National Fire Academy. We see Vision 2020 and Y-Fires, the work that comes out of Abraxas, which is a juvenile delinquency facility that really is the leader in the treatment of kids who set fires. All of the work coming out of the University of Pittsburgh and Dr. Coco. But really, it is hard to find a program. In Pennsylvania, everything is kind of at the lowest level of government. And, it's hard to get funding for these programs right now, in my experience. We're very fortunate in the state of Pennsylvania that we have the Burn Foundation and the Burn Prevention Foundation, and our fire commissioner, Tom Cook, has really reinvigorated the Juvenile Fire Setter Steering Committee. So, there are some resources out there, but I would think that, the most important thing is, if all else you don't know what to do, you find the people in your community that can partner together, you can partner with, to create your educational program and to have some sort of social service involvement. Because, in the fire service, we do fire prevention every day, right? That's what we do. Community risk reduction is really the key to what we do. I heard a chief speaking at Symposium in the Sun, and he said, community engagement is our currency with the community, and that is so true. I've had times where people have knocked on the firehouse door and said, my son or daughter's playing with fire, what do I do? And to be able to give them resources is super important. And the most important resource we see is education.
So often whenever we're trying to implement something new, the biggest currency to get that into place is positive outcomes or successful outcomes. So with that being said, are we seeing successful outcomes from the children who have gone through some of these programs that are in place?
Yeah, I think nationwide, statistically, we see positive outcomes from juveniles who participate in youthful fire prevention and intervention programs that consist of education, social services, kind of that multidisciplinary approach, sometimes cognitive behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy light, just some form of therapeutic component. But we have seen statistically that the kids who participate in these types of programs are less likely to light fires in the future.
Well, Bill, it was a pleasure to have you on the program today. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
all your great information and all your insight. And thank you for your time. So again, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And I want to thank you for listening to the program and for your interest in VFIS safety resources. I want to thank our guest, Bill Wiegman, once again for his time and information. Please consider subscribing to our program to stay up to date on new content releases. Also, if you like what you've heard, please consider leaving a review below. For more information about the many resources available from VFIS, please visit VFIS.com. And to submit ideas for future discussions, please reach out by emailing VFISriskcontrol@VFIS.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this program are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Gladfelter Insurance Group, VFIS, and its employees. Additionally, all views, information, or opinions expressed are provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice on any subject matter.